Hey everyone, my name is Daniil and I will show you how to integrate Payload CMS and Clerk. In this example, we're covering webhooks, custom components. Also, we have some automation with Playwright for end-to-end testing. As you can see, this is the demo project and it has a pretty simple layout. On the header here, we have the user button. The user button has admin panel link, which links to the Payload CMS in case the user has access to it. And also in manage account, what we have is admin account. Basically, this is the Payload profile. And let's go and see the Payload CMS. So I'm navigating to the admin panel. And as we can see, we're navigating to the /admin as a URL. And what we have here is the welcome panel as a start with a city or database functionality. This will create users for the demo purposes and end-to-end testing. Everything is described in the README as well and in the video. So the next things are the users collection. Here we can see the demo users which I created via the seed function. And inside each user, what we can do is we can refresh clerk data. In case the user updated their profile, we can change the roles, assign the roles as well. And we have the deleted checkbox to see if the user was deleted or not. Basically, we support soft deletion. If we go back and we can also check the profile, which is also integrated, as you can see, with Clerk and the same functionality. Basically, each user, they can refresh their data, or we as a super administrators can refresh each user's data. But this is only manual way. What we can do is also support webhooks to change the clerk's data, which is the proper way. I'm supporting this as well. We have webhooks endpoint, which you will see in the video. Also, what we have here is clerk users. This is basically a page where we can query the clerk's API to retrieve the users, like user 1, and assign the roles directly. This is basically needed for newly registered users and also when we don't support webhooks, because in users collection, those users are coming from the users which have access to the Payload CMS or when we have the webhooks. You'll see that in more detail in the video. Also, we're integrating with the logout button here. If I click that, we're actually logged out from the application because we're sharing the same authentication provider. So that's why this is working simultaneously in the website and in the Payload CMS instance. As you can see, all of the pages are embedded, so all of the pages can be customized and they have dedicated page components. So hope you enjoyed the video. Let's set up the project by following the README in the repository. So there are some links for the YouTube videos. I will add the second part, and you can find the source code for the part 1 of the video in the part 1 branch in here. And let's follow the getting started guide. So the first thing is to install the dependencies. I already did that in the project. I opened the project in the WebStorm and I did npm CI. Let me do it again. While this is loading, let's go and follow the README. The next thing is to create the Clerk application. So I already logged in Clerk and I'm going to create the application. Let's call it Payload Clerk example. And as per the README, we need to enable email as sign-in option. And we can enable the rest if we want to. So I'm going to stick with email only. So let's create the application. The next thing is to make sure that the test mode is enabled so that we can test the application as well as this is needed for the end-to-end test with Playwright. So let's go and check the documentation. It's in the test mode here, where we can see the enable test mode option. So we go to the dashboard, configure, then there is a settings, and there is a test mode. It is enabled by default. Let's go back to the README. And the next thing is to customize session token. This is explained in detail in the first part of the video, but you can have a look in the article here, which we followed. So to customize the session metadata for the user, we need this metadata for the roles to be exposed. So we need to navigate to the session page of the dashboard. So I'm going to the dashboard again. Then there is a session management, sessions, and there is a customized session token. We need to edit that, and let's copy the metadata from here. Basically, we're exposing the public metadata of the user, which is in here via the metadata property. So let's save that. So the next things are to copy the env example file into .env.local. It is important to name it like this because it is used in the package.json scripts as well as in few other places. So I'm going to copy the env example and paste it into file named .env.local. So .env.local is here, and as you can see we have several sections for clerk, payload and testing section. Let's go one by one. So I'm going back to the README, and the first thing is to fill in the publishable key and clerk secret key. Those can be found in the settings of the application. So I'm navigating back to the settings, and we have in developers, configure developers API keys. So here we can copy those. I'm going to revoke the application, so don't worry about me exposing those in the video. So the publishable key is this one, and then the secret key is this one. The sign secret is needed for the webhooks, which we will set up later in the video, so I'm going to skip this. Going back to the README, as described, sign key is for the webhooks, and then we need to set up the payload variables. So the payload section, first thing we need to select either SQLite or PostgreSQL. So I'm going with the SQLite option as for now, as per the default, and I'm going to show you in a bit how to set up the PostgreSQL. So I'm uncommented the database URI for the SQLite, and let's fill in the payload secret with some random strings. This should be very unguessable. Then the next thing is basically to choose, as described here, we selected the database URI for SQLite, but for the PostgreSQL, if we want to, basically we need to use this environment variable. Then in source payload config, we need to uncomment the Postgres adapter import and comment out the SQLite adapter. And then here in the DB property, we need basically to select the Postgres adapter, uncomment this one and comment this one or delete it. Basically, this is described in here. But for now we're going with the SQLite option. The next thing is to set up the users, which we can use for the local development as well as those users will be used for the end-to-end testing. Those users can be set up in two ways, automatically or manually, but we need to fill in the emails and passwords for those. Also, the phone numbers if we want to use them. So let's go and navigate to env local file. In here, we need to fill in the passwords. So I'm going to put some random password and let's paste those everywhere. This is for testing purposes only. So basically, as you can see, we have several users by default, and they're described as per the environmental variables. The first one is used for all roles. Basically, this user has all roles, and the super admin user role and admin role, editor role, and just the authenticated user one without any roles, simulating the newly registered user from the website. If we want to, we can enable the phone numbers as well. So in the email, phone, and username section. So let me clear this. And let's go to the user authentication in configure. As you can see, we have email address required. We can enable phone number. And then if we enable phone number, we need to fill in the phone numbers here as per example, and those are the test phone numbers, which is described in the documentation as well, linked in the README. But I'm going to skip the phone numbers for now. Basically, we need to leave the phone numbers empty if we're not using the phone number option. So we need to register the end-to-end users. First thing is basically to run the application, and then we're going to invoke the set endpoint. This way we will register the users automatically. So let me run the application. As you can see, npm CI executes successfully. Okay, let me open the application. While this is loading, let's check the console. Okay, compiled. As you can see, I have linked the video here. I will do the next link for this video as well. And the application is running. We need to navigate and invoke the set endpoint. So I'm going to invoke it. And let's follow the console here. So it is compiled. And here, as we can see, all of these users which are filled in env local are registered, and they are registered in Payload CMS database in users collection as well as in Clerk dashboard. So let's go and check the users here. As you can see, those users are registered and everything works for now. And the important bit is that the endpoint will delete your existing data. So if you have any data, it will be deleted. This is for local testing and initial setup only. You can also register manually, basically the user. We can see that later when I will create a new user and role in the video. So I'm going to skip this for now. And as you can see, basically the application is working. We can log in and try with the admin user, super admin one. So I'm going to copy this and let's navigate back to the I invoked the set again, back to the sign in, and basically let's copy username, paste that here, password, paste that here. Okay, and let's try to navigate to the Payload CMS instance. It is compiling. Okay, as you can see, the Payload CMS instance is also working, and that was it for the setup part. Let's review the implementation. We can start by reviewing the website part. As you can see, this is pretty standard layout. We have header, the content, and the footer with the GitHub link to the repository. In the header, we have clerk user button, and we have custom admin panel linked to the Payload CMS instance. So let's see how it looks like in the code. I'm opening the project in WebStorm. Here in the source, we have the app folder, and the app folder has the app group folder, which is basically the website part, the payload group folder, which basically is the Payload CMS part, and then there is a my root, which is the example from the Payload CMS integration. So basically, let's go back to the app folder, the website part, and let's start with the layout. The layout is a pretty standard one, basically the Next.js default app layout. And the important thing here is that we have auth provider, which is wrapping the whole HTML block of the layout. And let's open that file. This file is located in the provider's auth provider. And basically it is a simple wrapper around clerk provider. Also, it is injecting the localization set to NUS, and you can change that if you want to support localizations as well in the application. The reason why I'm not using directly clerk provider inside the layout here, as per the standard installation, is because this auth provider needs to be shared with Payload CMS instance. And the Payload CMS instance is also using this provider inside the payload config, build config, and there is a provider's property for the components of the admin Payload CMS configuration. We can go through that in more detail when we navigate to the Payload CMS overview. So going back to the layout, what we have here is the header. Inside the header, we have the link basically for the demo, which is basically this kind of simulating the logo of the application. And I'm using Tailwind, as you can see here. And we have clerk user button component, which is located inside the components clerk user button. The idea of this user button is basically to display signed out or signed in states. Basically, currently I'm signed in and it is displaying user button. And also we have dedicated pages for the profile, user registration, login, profile registration. And what we have here is this user button is coming from the clerk Next.js. And then inside this button, we're adding another menu item called admin panel, but only when the user is admin enabled role. What are the admin enabled roles? Those are the super admin, admin, and editor, basically the ones which have access to the Payload CMS instance. This auth.ts file is the main file for the definition for the roles, and you can add more roles here, as I will show you later in the video. Going back to the button, we have check roles function. Basically, we're checking if the currently logged in users, first of all, does have roles. Basically, for the newly authenticated and registered users, there will be no roles property in the public metadata. That's why I'm checking that. And only for the admin, basically Payload CMS instances users, we will have the roles. And then we are checking if the roles which are assigned to the user are admin enabled ones, any of those. Going back to the implementation, as we can see, we're just linking the the link, we're adding the user button link to the this button, basically the as a sub-menu item. And when we click, we are going to navigate to the Payload CMS instance, as shown in href here. And obviously the admin icon, which is located in the components app icons. Okay, so let's go back to the header. Basically, as we reviewed the user button, the layout is reviewed, and on the footer option here, we have just the link to the GitHub repository. This is nothing for Clerk here. So going back to the website, if I navigate to the website again, what we have here is the pages. The first one is the login page. So if I log out now, sign out, we're displaying, by the way, the sign in button in a different state now, as I showed earlier. And then when we navigate, as you can see, the root is login. And this is basically this page here. And we're just wrapping the sign in from Clerk as a component. We can customize this further, but we have dedicated pages for login and for the registration. So if I want to sign up, so if I click sign up, as you can see, we're navigating to the registration, which is this page here, and we have the sign up from Clerk. If I navigate to the profile, so we need to log in, navigating back to the home, sign in, and then I'm going to use the users which we defined earlier. So I'm going to use superadmin, for example, to log in. Okay, and then what we need to do is to navigate to the profile page and review that. So I'm going to open the file and navigate to the manage account page. Basically, this is the profile/profile page, which is this file profile. And as you can see, we're just using the user profile from Clerk. And also we're checking for the same isadmin enabled roles. And we're adding the profile link, which is admin account here. If I click on the admin account here, we are going to navigate to the Payload CMS, basically user instance. And what we have here is we can manage the roles. We can also see if the user is deleted, etc. But this is basically the profile. We can also sync the Clerk data. We're going to review this in more detail a bit later. As you can see, this is a account page for the particular user, and we're displaying Clerk's data, like the Clerk user ID, first name, last name, email address, and phone numbers. Those fields are read-only, and they're coming from Clerk, and they're coming from Clerk via the webhooks, which we're going to set up later, or we can basically refresh the data in case we don't want to use the webhooks. We can refresh the data from this button here. The refresh Clerk data is working for basically the profile page for the current user. They can refresh their own data. Also, we can, as a super administrators, we can refresh the data for various other users in the users collection, which we'll see a bit later. We also display if the user is deleted or not, because we are supporting the soft delete option. In case user requests the delete account option, we can support the soft delete option, and we can change that later. This is supported via the webhooks only. And then we have roles, which basically this component is displaying the assigned roles to the user. As a super administrators, we can navigate to any users in the users collection and basically change the roles. and refresh the data or see if the user is deleted or not. For example, the current user, which I selected, is the default website user which we registered, and as you can see, it doesn't have any role. So what I can do is assign any role here and update it. So this should update the user in the Clerk's dashboard as well as a roles metadata. So let's go and try to check this one. So users, I'm going to find the user by the Clerk user ID, and here if I scroll, as you can see, we have roles now. Let's review the implementation in more details. I'm going to start with a middleware. It is in source middleware. So this middleware is pretty standard Clerk middleware which we set up in the first part, but I'm going through the implementation of all of the setup as a review in this part as well. So the Clerk middleware is defined in a pretty standard way. What we have is protected routes, which needs to be protected via the Clerk authentication, and we define the payload route, which is in /admin, and then a protected website route, which is /profile, because this needs to be behind authentication to retrieve the user's profile, as we saw earlier. Then what we do is we use auth function, which is returning the user ID if the user is authenticated, and then basically that's the whole authentication bit. If it's not authenticated and when it is protected route, we redirect to sign in. This middleware always runs for the API routes as well, which are for the Payload CMS API. So let's go and navigate to the payload config. This payload config file is pretty standard as well. As you can see, what we have here is the admin part. Let me expand all of them. So the admin part defines the user collection, which is in basically users collection. We'll go into that in a bit. And the rest are pretty standard. The import map, where it is located, and the important bit is all of these components, which are custom components. We can go into that in a bit and review them. The next things are basically the collections which we have: users, media, and posts. We will review the users collection, and then we have the database properties, which you can pick either SQLite or Postgres, as mentioned earlier. So let's go and check the users collection. The users collection is responsible for authenticating the users, basically. That's why we have auth property set here, and we are using custom authentication strategy. Basically, what we do is we retrieve the Clerk user and set it in Clerk user ID as a column, and this way we're authenticating the user in payload. Let's go and see the implementation. So this strategy exposes the name and the authenticate function. This authenticate function basically retrieves the user and returns it. But how we retrieve the user? So let's see. What we have here is we're authenticating again via the Clerk auth function, and then we're retrieving the user ID and the current user for the information like first name, last name, etc. If the user is not authenticated, basically we return null, and the authentication fails with Payload CMS as well. But then when we have the user ID and the user information, we first check in the user's collection, because we're saving by Clerk user ID, and if the user exists or not. If this is the first time when the user logs in Payload CMS instance, then we create the user. That's why basically the user is not found. And then what we do is we extract the email addresses, phone numbers, and then what we do is we create the record in the user's collection. And as you can see, we set the first name, last name, and additional information, as well as we set the is deleted to false, which is used for the soft deletion of the user later, which is consumed via the webhooks. So the current payload user then is returned, the newly created one, or basically when the user is found, then we just assign to the found user and return it. This is how this clerk authentication strategy works. Basically, it is looking for the user ID, clerk user ID, and basically it is returning the user. The important bit is that only the users which have roles for the administration panel can access the Payload CMS instance. This is defined in the access function in admin property. Basically, here we're saying only admin enabled roles, the users which have these admin enabled roles, like super admin, admin, and editor, can access the payload instance. Otherwise, the request will be forbidden. Going back to the users collection, what we have here is the admin part of the customization. So let me open the users collection. I'm on the main page, navigating to users. And as you can see, here we're browsing the users collection, and what we have here is we display as a title the clerk user ID because it's mandatory, and we can use it to search the clerk dashboard. Basically, if I copy this one and navigate to the users in the clerk dashboard and paste that, we can see that we can find the user by this ID. So that's why this is kind of a link between the clerk dashboard and the payload CMS. But for usability purposes, we also save the first name, last name, and email addresses together with the phone numbers if they're enabled, just for the usability purposes for like easier searching. For example, if I want to find the super admin user, we can find it. And why we need this collection? So that we can easily manage the roles and refresh clerk data if we want to. So that's why. We also have clerk users page where actually we browse all of the users from here, and we can set and make them admin enabled users, basically either super admin, editor, etc. But going back to the users collection, let's review the rest of the options. In the first part, the collection was hidden and we were using only the clerk users one for directly using the source of truth, which is clerk. But in this part, I have enabled and customized the users collection so that it is more user friendly. So we can see that we display the default columns, clerk user ID, first name, last name, and email address, which are in here. User ID, first name, last name, and email address. We also search for clerk user ID, email, and phone numbers. Basically, when we search in here, we search by these columns only. And then what we do is to simulate, to use the soft delete. What we do is if the user is deleted, we are not going to show it here. So that's why we have this base list filter, which is filtering by the is deleted property column. The next bits are the access part. I'm going to navigate and show you quickly about the access, but again, this was implemented in more details in the first part. Let me go through that quickly. We have create, read, update, delete, access, as well as the admin part, which we discussed the users who can access the Payload CMS, and there are few other bits which are forbidden for the if the version if the collection is versioned, we have the read version, and basically this is forbidden by default when we use standard authentication, but I just made it forbidden. So what we do here is we disable the creation via the API by default. Then what we do here is we basically admin enable roles can read the collection so that they can see the profile like this. If I'm like editor, not super admin, for example, I can still see my profile, and I can still browse the collection. So that's why we have admin enabled roles. The roles definition is in auth constants, and we will be adding a new role. I will go through that in more detail so that you know how to add or edit new roles. So we have check role function which I'm using. It is basically retrieving from the clerk session the roles, and it is checking if the assigned to the user roles belongs to any of the roles to check. So here we are checking if the user belongs to any of the admin enabled roles. Going back to the users collection, the rest of the properties are basically the same, the rest of the access properties, and basically that's the main part of for the authentication. The authentication functions are all in here, and you can have a look, and we have examples with the posts. For example, we have different authentication, and you can look into this in more detail. And going back to the users, what we have here is the fields. As discussed, we're saving the user clerk user ID as a field, and this is basically a very important field which we're using for authentication and basically the integration with clerk, and the rest are optional, and they're used for basically usability only. So we have is deleted, which is boolean for the soft delete part, and then we have first name, last name, email, and phone numbers, which I'm going to skip. Those are pretty standard. We have refresh clerk data button, which is a UI field, which is custom component, and this custom component is located in here. For example, if I go, let's pick one of the users, for example, the user test, which is this one. I'm browsing as a super administrator, so I can access and edit everything here. Basically, we can refresh clerk data and assign to the user the role. But if I go and copy the clerk user ID and navigate and try to find it. Okay, this is the user test. What we can do is edit the first name and last name. And by the way, those are disabled by default, so let me quickly enable those. In here, what we have is personal information, name. Let me modify this so it will not be required. So let's make it optional, as you can see, and save that. So this warning should disappear now. Excuse me. So if I go and navigate to the user, as you can see, the warning disappeared. So now the users can edit their first name and last name from the profile as well, which was in here. Manage account. Now if I update the profile, I can put first name and last name. Before I was enabled to. So let me cancel that and close that. So going back to here, I just wanted to show you the refresh clerk data functionality. So if I do like last name updated, and save that, basically we're simulating when the user has updated their last name. In here, in the collection, we're still not going to see the updated data because this is saved in payload. If we enable the webhooks, obviously we will see the last name updated here as well, but the webhooks are in pro version, so I have another option. In case you want to do it manually, you can use a refresh clerk data. So this is going to make a request to clerk and refresh and get the latest data with test updated as a last name. That's the whole idea behind the refresh clerk data button. Obviously, it is better to use the webhooks so that, but you have the two options here. So let's review this component quickly. What we have is inside the components, payload, fields, and then we have refresh clerk data button. And basically that's the whole button here. It is a client component because we need the on-click functionality. So just a pretty standard button, which is actually coming from the Payload CMS UI to make it look the same as the UI. And we have handle on click, which is basically firing the refresh clerk data action, which is located in the same directory. And basically this action is consuming the clerk user ID, and only the superadmin roles can refresh the clerk data. So we're checking if it is superadmin. I'm logged in as a superadmin. So if I navigate here, as you can see, superadmin. And if I navigate in roles here, I can see that I'm superadmin. So that's why I'm passing this check. Then what we do is we initialize the payload so that we can find the payload user. And when the payload user is not found, we error. The next bits are to initialize the clerk client and get the data from the clerk client by the clerk user ID. When the user is found, we just set the email addresses, phone numbers, and the first name and last name, and update the record via the payload. And we revalidate the paths which are responsible for this data. So that's the whole functionality for this component, the refresh clerk data button. Then what we have is the update clerk user roles. Let me show you in the UI. So if I navigate in test updated, by the way, let me go and change this again to test, save. Then let's navigate to this one again, refresh. Okay, it's gone. So that we have consistent data for the next tests. And then if I navigate back to update clerk user roles component, so I'm picking the same user, and this is this component. What we can do is when the users are registered, like the newly created users, now what we can do is go here in clerk users section and assign the roles so that they can log into Payload CMS, and then once they log in, they will have some role assigned. But also we can change this, we can change the roles from here as well. So let me pick, for example, editor role and update it here. And this role is updated, so if I go and navigate to the user, and if I try to refresh actually, as you can see, there are like roles updated here in the public metadata. If I try to revoke them, this should be revoked. Okay. Going back, if I go back to the users collection, let me close everything. And as you can see, we're importing the update user roles field. So this field is this file here. And what it does is, again, it is checking if it is only super admin roles which are using this field, and then passing if it is authorized or not to invoke the edits on the roles. If it's not, it will be kind of a read-only disabled functionality. Then what we do is we're finding the user, which is basically passed as a clerk user ID via the UI field server properties. And how this is working is basically the UI field server props. We have the data, which is basically the data of the opened document. And from the data, we can extract the clerk user ID, which is this one. And then we can find the actual clerk user via the SDK of clerk. And then we're passing the roles for the user and then the ID again. So that's how it is working. Basically, we can access the UI field. We can access the data for the document via these server props. After that, what we're doing, this is by the way server component, and we're passing the data to the client component, which is the actual field set with the checkboxes. We have is authorized, as we saw, clerk user ID, and the roles. We'll set the roles into a state, which we handle the change on the checkboxes here. And then we have the submit, the handle submission part. So we iterate through all of roles, which are defined again in the constants auth file. And if I go back, here we just iterate through them and display them, and then we are checking the checkbox if the role is basically assigned to the user. And then we are handling the changes to the checkboxes here. When we click, we are firing the change, which basically is setting the roles. And when we're ready, when we click the update roles, handle submit is fired, and then we fire the update clerk user roles action. And this action is pretty similar to the other one. We have super admin roles to check. Only those can access this functionality. Then what we do is we update the user with the roles set from the form. We have some error handling here, and we revalidate the paths. So basically, that's the whole bit for the customization of the users. If I go and navigate back to the home page of the dashboard, what we can see is, let's go back and see review the other custom components as mentioned. We have in the payload config in admin part various custom components. So first thing is the logout button, which we implemented earlier in the previous part. So if this is this logout button next to the Next.js icon, and this logout button basically invokes the logout functionality from Clerk. So it is in components, payload, elements, logout button. As you can see, we just invoke the sign out, and we have the logout icon coming from the Payload CMS UI. And basically, when this is returned, we navigate to the root page. When the sign out is resolved as a promise, it should redirect as well to the root page, but in case it is not, we also redirect manually, so to say. So let's go and see the next ones. What we have here is the before dashboard welcome panel. which is in the elements before dashboard, the welcome panel. And basically this welcome panel is displaying seat database button, which is this one. And this seat, your database is basically available only when we're running locally. That's why I'm checking for the production. And as mentioned, we can either invoke the seat endpoint manually as in the README to create our users. Let me open that quickly. As mentioned in the README, in here get endpoint API app seat, or the link here, or we can use this seat database at some point again when we're logged in as a user. So here there are various states. Is loading, is seeding, the errors, so I'm just going to skip that quickly. You can have a look in more detail, but the important bit is that we're invoking API app seat functionality, and this functionality is a endpoint which is located in app API app seat. So there is a custom root, which again we're checking if the not environment is production, we're actually denying the request. And if not, if it is development or any other basically not env, we can basically invoke the functionality. We are starting with the acquiring the payload instance, and we're also constructing the payload request. This is needed for transaction management, and this is basically similar, almost the same code from the website template, official website template from Payload CMS starter. And then we await and we run the seed function. The seed function, basically what it does, it is going through all of the collections and deleting them. It is going through all of the versions of the collections and deleting them if they're versioned. Then we are starting with the acquiring the clerk client instance, and then deleting the users from the clerk dashboard, which are set in the end.local file as mentioned earlier. So we are using this system kind of test dev local dev users. We need to delete them by email. That's why the email is important as an identifier. Then when we are done with the clerk part, we need to delete the same users from the payload users database. And then what we do is we create them one by one, and as you can see there is a create user function which is defined in here. So going back to here, we define the clerk all roles user with all of the environment variables which are set, and then we supply the roles. We need to add the custom role here in case you want to add the role. We are going to do that later. So we invoke this method for all of the roles defined in the env.local file, including the last one, which is simulating the newly created user without any role. And basically that's it as a seed function. The next things are the clerk user link. Going back to the payload config, as we can see there is a after nav links component, and this is basically this clerk users page. So if I navigate to it, which can be accessed by super admin users only, and what we have here is the components. Inside the components we have payload, elements, after nav links, clerk user link, and then this basically is invoking the admin clerk users view, which is defined in here. views clerk user view, which is a custom view component. So let me open clerk users in here. And this clerk users, again, it is available only for the superadmin roles, and the idea is that, as we saw earlier, we can find any user which basically will be available in clerk dashboard. It can be newly registered users, and we can make them admins or any other roles. So this is the source of truth for searching for the integration between clerk and Payload CMS. So let me try to find the regular user, which is the user one without any permissions, and we can just set the role. In case we want to see more information, we can, once the user logs in and navigates to the Payload CMS instance, we can see them here, or if the webhooks are enabled, we will see the newly registered users here as well. But this is a way to make the users administrators, the newly registered users, as administrators or editors or any other role. This is a way to set the role from the user in here and to set it here. So that's the main functionality. We are using basically to have this view embedded in the Payload CMS UI. We need to use so-called the default template, and this is a gutter. All of these components are UI components from Payload CMS, which is basically acting as a container. And then we have H1, as you can see, and then we have the search user component, which we are using to search the users via the clerk SDK. We have the text input, and when we change that, we're basically invoking the same page with the search query parameter, which this search query parameter is then retrieved in here, and it is searching the users using get users list from the clerk SDK, and we then display the users as we saw. Basically, if I type user here, we see that displayed here. What we do is we display first name, last name, email addresses, and then we have the update roles form. This update roles form is similar to the one which we saw earlier in the users panel. So basically we iterate through the roles, we have checkboxes, and we have an action which is executed. But this time it is a form action. So this action is located in here on the same folder, clerk users, and it is checking again for the access. We then do some validations using Zot. When everything is correct, we extract the roles, we create the clerk client, and then we update the user by the ID and set the roles and revalidate the path. So basically that's the whole idea and all of the custom components. And then, as mentioned earlier, we share the provider, the auth provider, between the website part as defined in the layout. As you can see, the auth provider is located here, and basically this is the clerk provider. And in the clerk payload config, we have the same provider referenced, so that we share the same session and we can use the client components in the Payload CMS pages. Now let's see how the webhooks are working. We can check out the README for the webhooks. So it is on the bottom, scrolling to the webhook section. And first thing is that we refer to the official documentation in Clerk for setting up the webhooks. So I followed this article First, we are going to set up the ng-rock so that we can test the webhooks locally. We are going to set up the webhook endpoint, create the webhook which is already implemented, and I'm going to review the implementation, and etc. We're going to receive the events and to test the webhook. And let's go through the article. The first step is to set up the ng-rock. So basically, ng-rock is a way to expose your local host via static domain or dynamic one, so that clerk can send webhooks events to it. So first thing is to navigate to ng-rock dashboard, which I already did and I already registered. You can follow the setup and installation guide. I installed ng-rock for macOS, but actually we're going to use Docker as well, so you don't need to install it. One thing to note here is the static domain and the auth token. I'm going to refresh the domain and the auth token, so don't worry me exposing those in the video. You can access your auth token from here as well, basically in here or in here from a lot of places. And you can also access the static domain which we're going to use in Universal Gateway domains, basically this one, or create a new one. You need to create a new static domain. So going back to the article, in Clerk, make a note for the static domain as well as for the auth token. The next thing is to set up the webhooks endpoints. So if I navigate to Clerk dashboard, in the application, we're going to configure here. There are developers webhooks settings. So here we need to add the new endpoint, and basically what we need to do is to use the domain which is in the Universal Gateway domains. We can copy that from here or any other places. Let's do HTTPS. Okay, and then let's go back to the README, and we can use this post endpoint, basically API Clerk webhooks, which is already implemented for us. So I'm going to paste that here. Basically your URL should look like this, the domain and then the API Clerk webhooks. Let's go back to the article. As we can see, basically this endpoint is set in a similar way, and we will subscribe to the events. Going back to the README of the repository, we're going to subscribe to created, updated, and deleted the user events. So here we need to subscribe to events. We need to select user, created, deleted, updated. And I think that was it. We can create the endpoint. And as you can see, we have sign-in secret here. So we need to copy this sign-in secret as a value. I'm copying that. And paste this into our env local file. If you remember, we discussed that we need sign-in secret environment variable when we work with webhooks. So I'm pasting this here in the env.local file. So that and let me restart the application. As you can see, actually it reloaded, but I'm going to restart it anyway. Going back to the README, basically step 3 is done, and here we can set up the webhook. It is already implemented, and we need to install Swix, which we already have in the dependencies, and we can create the endpoint. I'm going to show you the endpoint in a bit. And basically, there are a lot of details how to implement this endpoint, and we're going to test this in a bit. So basically, that's the whole documentation in the clerk.com. And if we go back to the README of the repository, basically what we did is this part, and now we can test this. Before testing, I'm going to show you this endpoint. So it is in source, app, the app group folder, API, clerk, webhooks, root. So we have this root. So if I expand this a bit, let me first collapse everything. Basically, it is exposing post root, which we defined in the clerk dashboard. Let me close this and this. So it is defined in here as a post endpoint, and clerk is going to send the events to this endpoint. So let's start by looking into the implementation. We're reading the signing secret, which is mandatory, so that we know that the webhooks are basically, we use this signing secret to verify that the webhooks are coming from a legit web server and not faked. So the next thing is Clerk is using Swix, as we mentioned, to deliver their webhook events. So we use Swix library to extract all of these properties which should be present. And then the next bit is we are basically getting the request payload and request body. And then we verify. This is a very important part where we verify using the signature that this webhook is a legit webhook. And when everything is okay, we're starting by reading the data of the webhook and the event type. This event type is basically can be the event from user created, user deleted, or updated, basically the event types which we subscribe to. And then we have these functions which I created so that we can handle the user created or updated and user deleted events. So the first one is the created or updated. This function is invoked only when the user event type, the webhook event type, is user created or updated. So as you can see, it is wrapped in a if statement. And we basically start reading the user ID, first name, last name, all of the data. We also output it for debugging purposes. And then what we do is we acquire the payload instance. We are trying to find the user in the users collection. And when it is not found, we basically create it. And when it is found, we update it. So that's the whole implementation of the function. Going back to the function definition, to the main endpoint, we have handle user deleted, and again it is wrapped in a user deleted if, and actually we can exit earlier maybe if we wrap it like this. Maybe it's a bit more readable, and then we can drop this if, but I did that like this, so maybe I can change this a bit later. And similarly, we read the clerk user ID, we try to find it in the users collection. When it is found, we just mark it as deleted. Basically, this is the soft delete option which I was mentioning. And here, if we don't want the soft delete option, we'll just delete the user instead of updating with is deleted true. So that's basically it for the webhooks implementation. And we can handle various events from the clerk. There is an event catalog which we can use, and basically the main point is that I'm handling the user events, and in case you want to enhance the functionality, feel free to do that. There is an email create, for example, we can do that, but because it will also uh, invoke the user updated event, we are handling the email updates as well. Basically, all of the information which we are interested in. So, going back to the README of the repository, let's try and test this. So, we can use Docker or basically ngrok directly. So you need to, if you installed ngrok natively, basically without Docker, you need to authenticate it as per the ngrok documentation. But I'm going to use the Docker option. I'm on macOS, and let's copy this and paste that here. I'm going to create a new scratch quickly, plain text, paste that so that we can edit this quickly. So first thing is we need to replace ngrok token with a real one. So I'm going to navigate to ngrok dashboard again, to the home page, and there is a your auth token. This is a way to authenticate, by the way, natively. Oh, I can copy actually from here. Okay, paste that here. Then the next things are what to replace is the domain. As you can see here, ngrok domain, and this is the static domain because the one which we filled in the endpoint here. And this domain should be in this form. So inside Universal Gateway, there is a domain. So I'm going to copy that without HTTPS, basically. And let me copy the whole thing and execute this inside another terminal. Paste that here. Okay, double checking all token, then ngrok the latest version. We're going to execute HTTP. Host docker internal is only for the macOS part, and then the URL. This is described in the README, by the way. In case there is other OS you're using, you don't need to supply the host docker internal 3000, just the 3000 bit you need to use. So, okay, I'm going to execute this. Basically, this will start an instance of ngrok, and this instance will tunnel to our local host 3000. We can quickly test that by, as you can see, we're routing the traffic. We can quickly test that by navigating to our domain. Copy that, paste. And the first time we visit that, there is a confirmation that from ngrok, just to make sure that me as a user, I'm aware that I'm visiting localhost, basically. Visit site or any other application. So as you can see, we are tunneling to localhost. Okay, now this is working. Let me close that, and let's go to the clerk dashboard again, which I am here. Webhooks. Then let's navigate to already created endpoint, and we have testing bit here. So if I go back to the README, basically we can see that we replaced the all token domain, so we don't need the README anymore. So I'm closing that. And let's go and navigate to the localhost again and to our admin panel. I'm going to navigate to the users collection so that we can see how the users are created using the events. It's taking a bit because it is compiling. the dashboard. Okay, now we're in Payload CMS. If I navigate to users, we can see all of the regular demo users which we created, and there are 5. So if I go here and let's try to test this. First, we can test the user created event. So user created event is applying this data. Obviously, this data is fake data. The ID of the user actually will not exist in our clerk database, basically in users. But we're just testing the functionality, the logic. We're not actually verifying if the user actually exists. So as you can see, there is a user 29 ending with CC. So I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going also to expand this a bit, clear the buffer. This is the running application console, so that we can see the logs from the logic which we implemented the root for the webhooks. So let me send this. It is sending. Okay. So as you can see, we can see various logs here. We can see received webhook with ID 29cc, user created event. Then we dump the request body, and then we basically process the webhook. You can later remove all of these console logs. As you can see, we have received webhook with ID and the event type and the request body, and the logic is received, is executed, and then we return 200. In case something went wrong, basically clerk is going to retry, or Swix if we are more concrete. Swix is going to retry the webhook, and at some point it will give up in case we're receiving a lot of not 200 responses. So this is well described in the documentation of Clerk website as well as Swix. So let me check if this user, which we copied, so let me copy the ID again, is actually created. So I'm navigating to users again. Let me refresh and let me paste that. As you can see, there is a new user created. So this way, when you have enabled webhooks, newly created users will already be here, and you can just go and assign the roles to them in case you want to make them like premium user or maybe like administrator, etc. Or you can go in clerk users again and search for the ID of the user by navigating to the users and assign the role. But this was discussed already before. So if I navigate to our user again, like trying to find it, as you can see, because it's not valid user in clerk, we have like one issue that there are no roles, and obviously a refresh clerk data is not going to work, and we have the issue here because it's not valid. The user is not found. You can ignore this error. So let's see if we try to update this user, and the example body we cannot change, by the way. It is static example. So if I try to search for the ID, as you can see, we're updating the same user which we created via the webhooks, and the difference is that this user actually has the first name example as before, but the last name is set to null. So if I go and look for this user again, we can see that first name is example and last name is example. And the new update webhook is basically setting the last name to null. So let's try and send this. Let me go to the logs again, clear the buffer, and send this webhook as well for the updating the user. First thing is let's go and refresh our page. As you can see, the last name disappeared, so it is set to null, and we can see that we're processing the webhook successfully. So we received the webhook for this ID with user updated, and so on and so on. Let's see how we can delete the user. So let's navigate to the user deleted and let's search for the user. And as you can see, the user is actually a bit different ID here, with a bit different ID. So this webhook will not be able to work with our user because it doesn't exist. So we basically need to manually edit the ID and then trigger the delete. So if I send this example, we should see webhook received actually, and then we are deleting the user, but because when we look for the database, when we execute the find user query, it is actually not found, so we just return. So you can test with real users if you enable this in production, and basically that's the whole functionality for the webhooks. I have also implemented end-to-end testing using Playwright, and the end-to-end tests are a bit simple and they can be improved further, but the main idea is to test the authentication and authorization part, as well as access control for the APIs provided by Payload CMS, and we are testing against all of the roles which we defined. So let me show you in the README how to set this up. We have end-to-end testing section. Again, as mentioned, I'm using Playwright, and the tests are divided into two categories: API tests, which are basically testing the access control for the payload APIs. If you remember, there was a, let me show you quickly. In here, in source collections, we're going to test the posts collection, and there is the access control, and basically we're testing all of the interactions with various roles, basically those bits here. And then there is a app tests, which are basically the tests for the application itself and the pages which are behind authentication. So before that, you need to install the dependencies. You need to execute those two scripts, npm ones, and then after you executed them, you can pick the mode for the testing. Basically, those two are the command line options, and the main one is the CI. If you are going to use the CI, then you can go and use this one. And the main idea is that when developing locally, you can use UI mode. So I'm going to copy this and navigate. So let me close everything and navigate to the console, and let's execute this. So this will fire a Playwright test UI tool. And first thing is now it is loading the tests. While this is loading, I'm going to show you quickly the tests. So let me minimize the console. In here, in the test folder, we have API tests and app tests. So this is the actual tests, and inside the API tests, we have authentication tests related to the posts collection. And for each of the roles, we have separate specification. Basically, we're executing HTTP requests and we are searching on the response. Then what we have here is the app tests. Again, they're related to authentication mainly, only currently. And then we have for each role we have the specifications. They're pretty much similar and simple, but the main idea is to make sure that the roles are basically working as we expect. And then there is a global setup file, which we're setting up the for each role the sessions and store them into a separate file which we use in the browser context. Let me show you quickly the Playwright config. In here, um, this is pretty much standard config. The main part is that because payload is compiling around maybe more than 10 seconds on my machine, that's why I needed to increase these timeouts. And also what I modified is I added all of these projects. So we have the global setup project, which again I'm going to review. We have, let me minimize all of them. We have set up for each of the roles, and then we save the results, basically the sessions from the cookies, into a JSON file. And let me show you the superadmin, for example. If I expand this, so basically the superadmin setup is calling the authenticate user function, which I extracted because it is used in the API tests as well. What we do here is we create a new browser context, and then when we create a new browser context, we open a new page and we invoke clerk setup. This is well described in the clerk's documentation inside the testing bit, Playwright overview. So basically I went through all of this and created the simple tests here. And the clerk setup we need so that basically clerk is creating testing tokens so that we avoid the bot detection from clerk. And then we navigate to the root page and we use clerk sign-in helper, not the UI option as in the other tests, but we use the helper which signs the user in. And then we check the profile because this is behind authentication, and if we can see the account title, then we are safe to store the session in the browser in the context storage. So that's the global setup, and it is executed for all of the roles, as you can see, and basically those roles are saved into a separate files. Going back to the configuration, we have the next project is API tests, and this is depending only on the global setup, and it is not running on any devices. Basically, it is using the default request. We're going to look into those tests in a bit. And then we have the app tests should be executed for all the browsers. So we have Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. And they also depend on the global setup. Going back to the UI, what we have here is the global setup selected and the app tests. So we can pick the project from here. For testing purposes, I'm going to run only with Chromium, and global setup also needs to be selected. So if I go and try to run the tests, app tests, we should execute the global setup first. Sometimes it is not executed automatically, so you need to invoke it first and then the next tests. Basically, the dependency needs to be run first. And as you can see, we're executing the tests. As you can see here, we're checking the profile and we're saving the token. And let's see, for example, the admin ones, those are executed in parallel and the rest are executed in sequence. So let's see how it goes. Okay, running the last tests here. Okay, looks like the tests are executed successfully. Let me go through the code quickly. So majority of the tests, what they're doing is they're navigating to the Payload CMS instance, and they're checking if they can see collections title. This way we're verifying that the admin can access the Payload CMS instance. Same for the all roles, but the all roles are actually a bit different because they can access the clerk users page, which is the super admin as well. And if we compare, it's the same for the super admin role, and the rest are pretty much similar. The user auth, basically the standard user, when the user navigates to admin, we should see unauthorized. So this is a check for the regular users which don't have permissions. So that's it for the app tests. What we can do is to look into the API tests. So the API tests are a bit different. They are basically executing all of the operations exposed by payload. We have find all, find by ID, published and draft, count, update all. So you can have a look into more details, not to delay the video. And basically I'm using admin post API client, which is defined in here in fixtures, Playwright fixtures. And basically I'm executing the requests and using the queries provided by payload, and I'm stringifying them and appending as per the API specification. And also I'm checking the contents of the returned results and asserting. So I'm not going into more details, but you can have a look. They're pretty much similar. The important bit is that I'm creating the posts clients in before each, and basically I'm deleting the records created in after each as well. Why I'm creating the client before each request, basically authenticating, doing the authentication, is because there is a timeout of I think 30 seconds in Clerk, so that majority of the tests will fail if this session is still used. So basically when I authenticate, the global setup project authenticates only once, but then if we're not going to authenticate after 30 seconds, the session is expired and the global setup actually is not executed anymore. So that's why I'm kind of repeating the logic here before each test. There is a way uh, to overcome this limit by using another flow like Postman or Insomnia. You can generate a long-lived JWT token, and basically we can modify the test to use this token. We can acquire it by get token and then the template name, but basically for simplicity I went through this approach to use basically to authenticate each user before each test, which is not optimal at all, but we can change this later by using long-lived tokens. Well, that was it for the end-to-end testing. Obviously, we can go into more details, but have a look at the code and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. As a next demonstration, let's try to define a new role. Let's call it read-only role, which is going to be used for read-only access. So the first thing is to define the role in source constant auth.ts file. And as we can see, we have constants for all of the roles currently, super admin, admin, and editor. So we're going to add a new one for the read-only one. Export const read-only role. And we can call it read-only. We also need to add this role to all roles array, because this array is used for displaying all of the roles, like the checkboxes in the TSX and any other places. So I'm going to add it here. Also, because this read-only role is going to be used by users which have access to the Payload CMS, that's why we need to add it to admin enabled roles. Basically, this group of roles are for the roles which have access to the admin dashboard, basically to the Payload CMS. So I'm going to add this one here. So we have other groups like admin roles and super admin roles. Well, so super admin roles actually consist of only one, but this is kind of for convenience only. You can see the usage where we use that in is admin roles checks, which is from the collections library access checks. We're going to use those checks in a bit. So going back to the out section, I think we're done here. We added the role, we added the all roles, and then we modified admin enabled roles as well, because it's Payload CMS related role. The next thing is to overview the collection access, if we're happy with it or not. So let's start with the users. Here we define first with double checking the access to the admin dashboard, and the access is admin enabled roles. As we can see, we check the current user. Let me minimize that. We check the current user if it belongs to super admin, admin, editor, or read-only roles. Again, this check roles function, we went through it. It is checking the current session roles, and basically it is passing to the check role utility function. So that's why we needed to modify admin enabled roles. This way the user with a read-only role will be able to access the dashboard. Let's check the rest of the access. So create, update, delete, unlock, and read versions are forbidden, which is already implemented by default. And we have also a read access. And read access is the same as the admin access, basically admin enabled roles if the current user belongs to any of those roles. So there will be no modifications on the users collection. Let's check the posts one. So the posts one who can create is admin enabled roles. So here we don't want the read-only roles to create new records. That's why we were going to modify this. And we also don't want to remove the read-only from admin enabled roles array, because this is used for a different purpose. So what I'm going to do is basically copy this function and paste it here and modify this a bit. So we need to basically say that every role can create new posts, super admin, admin, and editor, but not read-only one. So what we can do is maybe filter it and say that only those three, super admin, admin, and editor, will be present for the check. So the role should not be the, if I go to the constants again, constants out should not be editor, sorry, read-only role. Okay, so this should work. And then the next ones are the read access, which is by default we're leaving that. Basically here we're checking is admin enabled role. which is going to be true for the new role which we added. And then the update and delete ones are only for admin roles. The admin roles are basically those super admin and admin roles. So we're fine here. Or when it is not admin, it will be the ones which created the record. But by default, the read-only will not be able to create. That's why we're okay with update and delete here. And the read versions are the same as isadmin enabled roles. So that's fine as well. Let's check the media collection. The media collection is similar to the post collection. Basically, isadmin enabled roles can create those. So we are going to use the same condition for the media collection as for the posts. So I'm going to copy that and paste that here. Basically, who can create new media? It will be all of the admin enabled roles except the read-only one. So read is allowed, that's fine. Update is admin roles only, and then read is again is admin enabled roles. So all of these access properties are modified. You can modify them however you want, but the main idea is that, just to reiterate, we defined a new constant for the role, then we defined this constant, we added to all roles, because this all roles is used in update clerk user roles components, as you remember earlier with the checkboxes. That's why we need to add those. And then we need to decide if this role will be enabled for the Payload CMS and add it here as well. So I think we're done with the main definition. What we can do is also modify the seat endpoint so that we create the user for an example user for this role. So I'm navigating to source app again, API, application, app, seat function here. And if you remember, we were defining various users for the particular roles. So we need to do that. Basically, we need to modify this seat endpoint quickly. The first thing is to modify the environment variables. So in env local, also in env example, if you want to document that, we need to define a new set of environment variables for the read-only role. So I'm going to quickly modify this. Read-only user email, password and phone, and let's call this read-only one clerk test at example.com. The next thing is to modify the seed function. So from the top to bottom, let's go through the implementation. Here we're deleting the collections, and here we are looking for the clerk users. So we need to delete the one with the read-only user email. Then the emails matched with the read-only user email. Then the next bits are to delete those from the database. So I'm going to copy that and paste that as a new row here. Then the next thing is to create the actual user. So I'm going to go to the bottom and copy maybe the editor one, because it has the roles filled in. And let's see, the email address we need to grab from the environment variable here, paste that here. Then the password, copy that, paste it here. The phone number was in here, so I'm going to copy that and paste that here. Okay, so I think we're pretty much done with the implementation. We can also modify the README, basically saying that the users are read only user one, and then we have the new user from here. So let me copy that and paste it here, and then the phone number will be copied that, paste it here, and will be 6, for example. Obviously the password should be empty, and we can leave that as it is. Okay, so let's review the changes. Let me close that. What we modified is we added the role in the constants. We added this in admin enabled roles array. Next things, we modified the collections as we want to. Basically, we modified the crate by filtering the read-only role, or we can explicitly say how to deal with the access here. We modified the post collection in a similar same way. We modified the sit function so that we delete the clerk users by email address by the new email address, then the same for the payload users, and then we register the newly user here. And actually here I spotted that I'm supplying the wrong role. Let me put read-only role. Okay, so, and then finally we modified the readme. The readme is this modification here. So let's close that and let's try this out. I'm running the application. Let's navigate. By the way, as you can see, I'm going to refresh Clerk, and what we have is all of the old users. So I'm going to navigate and invoke the synth endpoint, and let's watch in the console. Okay, read-only one clerk test was created successfully as well. If we go back to the clerk dashboard, let's refresh quickly. And as you can see, we have read-only test. And if we navigate here, we can see roles, read-only. And let's try to log in. So I'm going to env local, and I'm going to copy the email. Let's go back to the website, sign in. Then use the password. And as we can see, we display admin panel because it is admin enabled role. So let's navigate to the Payload CMS instance. Okay, we navigate to the Payload CMS instance, and let's quickly check the permissions. Navigating to users, we cannot see any create records. Also, I cannot edit these roles, so because I'm not super admin anyway. In media, we cannot create any media. There is no create button. In posts, we cannot create posts. What we can do is we can create end-to-end tests by copying existing ones for the API. For example, the authenticated user API is similar. Basically, it doesn't have much permissions. You can have a look into that, but I'm not going to create end-to-end tests for now to save a bit of time from the video. But that was it for the how to create a new role. Thank you. Let's simulate registration of a new user and then assigning admin role to it. So first we need to create a new user, like regular users will do the registration. So I'm navigating to sign up, and let's fill in. So I'm going to say new user, and I'll say email. What we can do is maybe new user 1, and let's copy that. We need to have plus clerk test at example.com. Basically, the plus clerk test is important as a suffix, and then we can fill in the password. Let's continue. And the static code as per the clerk documentation for testing users is 424242. Okay, cool. And I'm logged in as a regular user. As you can see, I don't have access to the admin dashboard. So if I go and try to navigate to the admin, there is no admin profile and there is no admin panel link here. So if I try to log out now, and let's try to log in for as administrators. So let's sign in here, and only super admin users can assign roles. So I'm going to copy the email from the env local for the super admin one, paste this here. Let's use the password, and let's navigate to the admin panel so that we can assign the role for the newly created user. Let's go back to the dashboard for clerk, and we can see the actual newly created user here, new user 1. This new user 1 doesn't have any metadata, public metadata, basically no roles. And let's try to find it by email. So it will be new user 1. So let's go to clerk users. Again, the clerk users is querying directly the clerk API. So it is not going as through the payload as the users collection. So first we need to look into clerk users. So looking for this user, and we can assign it, maybe let's assign admin role and update this user. So as you can see, it is updated successfully. What we can do is go back here and refresh the users page, and we should see the role admin. Now the user actually can go back and to try to log in, and he will be able to, or she, to access the payload CMS instance. We should also see the user in here when the user will try to access the payload CMS, and we will be able to manage the user. Before, I was trying to create a new user and I navigated to the payload CMS instance, but the access was denied. But the user was still created, but with no roles. So there is another way to initialize the users collection with the brand new registered users, but they still need to go to the direct admin URL, which probably will not going to happen. And the users collection is going to be filled in automatically with the newly created users when we have the webhooks set up enabled. So basically, you can always use clerk users to assign the roles for the newly created users. And then later you can manage them through here once they navigate to the Payload CMS instance. Well, that was it for the whole part 2. I hope you liked the integration, and let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. Thank you very much.